what I try to do is, and I think everything in security should be done that way, is based on risk. What I try to do is knowing that I cannot get away with, no, I cannot care about compliance. That doesn't exist. You need to care. That's usually the first thing, because if you're not compliant with some things, you cannot do business. That's how the industry works. Now it's like, okay, how can I be compliant, but in a way that really reduce my risk, right? Sometimes it's very hard if I'm acquiring application security tool, right? I know that this tool help me to check the boxes I need to check and move forward. How can I use this tool? Does this tool also help me to reduce my risks? So let's say, okay, if the tool provides me the protection I need for the tech stack I use, for the kind of threats I have in my threat model, etc., then that's a good one, right? That's a combo, because I have compliance and I have risk reduction.
Welcome to Season 4 of The Elephant in AppSec, the podcast to explore, challenge, and boldly face the AppSec elephants in the room. I'm Alexandra, your host, AppSec enthusiast, and growth manager at Escape. Today, I'm joined by Vinicius Cassel, Application Security Manager at PowerSchool. With over a decade of experience in the security space, as a CISSP, ISO 27001 Lead Auditor, and a passionate technologist, Marcus has led security initiatives across multiple industries. He also previously led the OWASP Porto Alegre Chapter, and fun fact, we first met while volunteering together at BSides San Francisco. In this episode, we dive into the real value of certifications in AppSec, how they can provide structure and credibility, but shouldn't define a professional's entire skill set. We also unpack the balance between compliance and risk management, and between privacy and innovation, and why strong communication between security and engineering teams is more essential than ever. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow it on your favorite podcasting app or YouTube. It's the best way to avoid missing future episodes. And with that, get ready to hear Marcus' opinions. Dive right in. Hi, Marcus. I'm super excited to have you on Elephant and AppSec podcast. I know we kind of tried to run into each other besides San Francisco initially, and then sometimes took some time till we actually got to the recording. But yeah, I'm finally happy to have you on board. And I think over the past couple of months, I had so many conversations about different topics, and I've been asking people about the buzzwords that they hate the most, because I think application security industry in itself is quite filled, with buzzwords. And I think in the last episodes, a guest, she decided to actually not to pick specific buzzword, that she was talking about certification, how much she thinks that certification is actually so overrated, that a lot of people are chasing it, while, well, sometimes it is required, but does not replace the actual knowledge. Do you agree with that? Because it's interesting point of view.
Right. Well, first, thanks for having me. As you said, we were trying to do this for some time. I I think it really depends. The certification by itself, of course, shouldn't replace any experience that you have, or any knowledge, or shouldn't be your only way of acquiring the knowledge. Or even more, it shouldn't be a single criteria to hire somebody, or to define your progression, your career, right? No. Personally speaking, I use certification as a goal, as something that drove me to acquire some knowledge that maybe alone I would not even know exactly what to study sometimes, right? Sometimes when you are starting something, the first question is, where should I start? What should I study? What should I look for? And for me, the most value a certification can give you as the person chasing that certification is some sort of framework, right? What do you want to study? What do you need to learn, etc. So I use that in my own benefit to say, okay, I will study these things, right? What I think that is wrong or shouldn't be used that way is, if you have the certification, you're a good candidate, or you're a good professional, or you're a qualified professional. If you don't have the certification, it means that you are not, which is not the case. So for that thing, as a qualifier, I don't think it matters that much, but it can be goal that you have. It can be like a driver that you use to improve yourself, right? When I am hiring, for example, I search, I try to make the candidates demonstrate the knowledge they have as much as they can, regardless of certification, right?
Mm.
But now, speaking out loud, one thing that is good, especially for more like entry level positions, is if the person had some certification and they went through the right process, right? They studied, they took the exams in the right way. They at least they have the basic knowledge, right? They know the buzzwords, they know how
Yeah.
things in theory should work, right? So I think it's more how you use the certification than stamp it as this is very wrong or this shouldn't even exist at all. No, it has some good use, right?
Yeah.
That
I
that
think
that's
sometimes in terms of usage, it's hard. It just depends on the goal why someone decides to get it, because sometimes people study just for the sake of, getting the paper and help to advance instead of actually like acquiring the knowledge. Because I've been guilty, like personally, of sometimes some subjects that I didn't really like. I just learned by heart everything that was possible and then to pass it like with a good grade and then forget about it, the day after, like a race one grade, because it was not important. Like, do you think when it comes to like, this is on a personal level, but organizations also have to, acquire certification for the auditing purposes. Do you think it's also applicable for what you mentioned for organizations? Like, it gives a framework of where to start for junior organizations. For mature organizations, they kind of get more security knowledge with practice.
I think it also applies for organizations for sure, in a sense of if you, as you said, if you go for a certification, regardless, like it's SOC 2, ISO, PCI, you don't have too much option. You gotta do, otherwise you don't do business with
Yeah,
the.
how it goes.
But for the other ones, if you go just for the sake of having the certificate, it doesn't add too much because you are just checking boxes, right? But if you really implement what is, let's say, what is being said in that certification as a process and go a little bit further. So yeah, so answer your question, probably the maturity will come with practice for sure. But in general, yes, if you chase the certification for the sake of having a new badge, a new certificate, right? It doesn't add too much on how you do security. But it's still also good for, again, let's say you start a new startup right now, new company, right? And you wanna know like how would a good secure information security area, information security department would work. Those certifications usually have like a body of knowledge that you can use for, right? Even if you don't certificate later, they're a very good reference to say, oh, okay, so I need to have a risk assessment process. Oh, okay, so I need to go for resources and communication and awareness and, application security, like kind of give you like how security looks like in
Mhm.
the ideal world, right? But it's a very, very fine balance between I do just for the sake of doing, and I know I really want to implement, regardless if I'm certifying later or not. ISO is a very good example of that because a lot of companies, maybe the majority of them, do because they need a badge, they need to go for that certification. But it doesn't change like how better you are just because you have the badge, right? It only says, yeah, I'm able to follow what is written in that certification, and I have the minimum. I worked with the delegate of ISO in Brazil back in time, and he was used to tell us that the ISO could be seen as the the ground level, right? Once you are certified in ISO 27001, for example, you are demonstrating that you can have a information security management system, and you need to improve that. But that's the base, right? It's like I'm getting started, so I'm ready to have a well fundamented information security management system, but it doesn't say that no, you are in the state of the art. I think that's the
Yeah,
difference.
it takes time to get to that state of the art and security, and I think a lot of organizations still are not at the state of the art. But it's interesting, that you mentioned ISO, because I saw like on your profile you have like lead auditor of the ISO 27001 serial number, and like why I've just googled that, what it actually means, and I came across like a lot of vendor content, because I think a lot of vendors kind of publish how do they address, in a certain way, either certifications for like ASPN vendors, or also some dust vendors. I think also like some very like big companies, like Palo Alto. So what do you think for example, this content is actually useful, how they produce, like, oh yeah, I'm one tool that will help you specifically, to comply with the certification.
It's helpful for you to provide to an auditor that comes to your company and say, how do you do this? How do you implement this control? And then you can say, oh, I do this control because my tool, or let's say the tool that I'm using, it checks these boxes here. Let me show you how it works. Does it improve your security? It's kind of the same. It depends on, let's say you sell a tool, or I'm buying a tool for a vendor. It really depends how I use that, right? Depends how I use the tool. I can have the best tool and do nothing good with that tool. So um, now, and I think that's how the market is incentivized to work. Is like if the vendor doesn't tell me that, or doesn't show me exactly, okay, if I buy this tool, if I acquire this service or this tool, how can I use that in my certification process? I think they may be one step behind, because especially like in big companies, they have some criteria like, okay, you can only buy services or acquire services from vendors that have this, that helps us on these specific compliance programs here, right? As a security practitioner, it doesn't help me on how make my security better. Just say, okay, if you buy my tool, you are checking these boxes in that specific certification, right? It doesn't tell me like how you will help me to reduce my risks, which is what I'm looking for. Right? It's like, okay, if I buy your tool, here are my challenges. How do you tool help me to solve my challenges? That's what I'm looking for as a security practitioner. As a company though, the company has to partner with vendors that can help them. Like if I want to I want to take the ISO 27001, I want to partner with vendors that help me to get that would be a challenge I have. And then how can you help to solve the challenge of getting certified? But you see, the challenge is getting certified, not getting better secure. Yeah.
So how do you balance that, for example, the organizational needs of I think getting certified sort of in general, whether your needs as security engineer, maybe even with your personal kind of values as a security practitioner?
What I try to do is, and I think everything in security should be done that way, is based on risk. What I try to do is, knowing that I cannot get away with, no, I cannot care about compliance. That doesn't exist. It's like you need to care. That's usually the first thing, because if you're not compliant with some things, you cannot do business. That's how the industry works. Now it's like, okay, how can I be compliant, but in a way that really reduce my risk, right? So how can I do my things that I try? Sometimes it's very hard, but I think that's how I look to these things. So giving back to the example of when I'm acquiring an application security tool, if I am acquiring an application security tool, right? Okay, I know that this tool help me to check the boxes I need to check and move forward. How can I use this tool? Does this tool also help me to reduce my risks? Right? So let's say, okay, if the tool provides me the protection I need for the tech stack I use, for the kind of threats I have in my threat model, etc., then that's a good one, right? That's a combo because I have compliance and I have risk reduction. And that's how I do. That's how I do. What I avoid, and then there are two things. If the tool is only a compliance driven tool, right, but has like a very good price model, has a very good partnering with the company, I am the one to convince, or I am the one to say, no, we are not probably not using this tool. And the opposite is like, if it doesn't help us with compliance, but reduce our risks, I gotta find a way to get compliant, even if I acquire the tool, right? Let's say I'm acquiring that tool because it reduces a lot of risks. That's the best risk reduction I can have, but it doesn't help me with compliance. It usually doesn't exist. If reduce your risks, usually help with the compliance. But let's say it doesn't, then I need to find a way to get compliant, right? The company will say, "Oh, okay, buy that tool, but I still need to get compliant. Don't forget it." So I need to find another way to get compliant. Fortunately, again, every time you find something that really reduces your risks, they make you better in terms of compliance. So
Yeah.
usually,
I mean, they have to develop a feature that allows you to stay compliant because that's kind of the easiest goal to justify to the C-suite any security initiatives. For example, even like in ISO, I think in 2022 was the latest version, and they were talking about like secure coding there and accent on secure coding. But yeah, usually it's just guideline that's not really easy to enforce and a bit general. In this case, like how do you justify, for example, to developers, the impact of what you're going to do? Would you still kind of show to them that we're trying to pass that certification, or would you still tie it kind of to the risk and business value that you mentioned and what importance to them? How would you adapt the language?
how do I adapt the language? So I never, at this point in time, I've never came to my development team and say, hey, you need to do this because ISO is requiring us to do, right? What I usually try to do is come to them, and because again, usually if you do like, let's say, secure development, right? If you really do like good, include application security into the software development lifecycle in the right way, you are 99% of the times getting compliant with whatever ISO talk to you, they are asking you to do, right? Because they are not asking nonsense, right? They are asking
Yeah.
things that they are not that deep though, as you said. So what I usually do is I don't bring that as, hey, we need to do that because we gotta be certified in ISO. About we need to build a better product. We need to build a more secure application tech stack, right? Using their language and trying to insert in their process in a way that doesn't create friction, doesn't create noise, which that's a big challenge for us, right? From security, not creating friction, not creating noise, toil, as people say now. But that's what I do. And I don't work as I, fortunately, I guess I gotta say, I am not responsible for getting certified. So my language with the developers are pretty much, okay, let's create a good application secure. Let's improve our secure posture. And then I do like the translation with my GRC team to say, okay, here's what we do, and here's how I think we are getting compliant with this norm, which is a very good knowledge for me because I'm pretty much working on technical stuff every day, but I can translate that to the GRC team and say, hey, here's everything we do, how we do processes, the tools we use, and this is how each one of these steps in the process getting us compliant with this section of the norm. Right? And say, oh, okay, so they don't need to come to the developers and ask too many questions about how do you do this, how do you ensure that you are scanning your code, because that's usually how far the norms go. But that's pretty much how I do. And in terms of making them understand, well, I don't make anybody understand. That's a
Yeah.
very hard way to say, but helping or trying to clarify things, helping them to understand the problems, it's usually about risk. I usually try to bring the risk to them, not only in terms of security, but in terms of, hey, If you do this right once, you don't need to redo that. That works a lot. When they understand that sometimes fixing things in product, well, they understand very well that fixing things in production is much more work than preventing them from happening. You start getting like partners, right? You start getting people inside the teams that start spreading the word. Team, we need to make what Marcus is suggesting, because then like in a year, we'll be not having to fix that amount of vulnerabilities anymore. Imagine how much time you have to do other stuff, right? Does it always work? No. But the best results I got so far was when that worked well, right? When people, and that's what I try to bring to them. It's not like only that speech of this vulnerability is super risky from a secure standpoint. Sometimes it doesn't matter. They are not sometimes not developers. Out of security area people are not necessarily security minded. They don't have the same concerns we have as security. So I try to bring concerns to them that really are really painful for them, like rework, velocity impact, how much time, I mean, how long you take to go to production. That's a big one for them. If we can show them, hey, or amount of bugs you have to fix later in production, and uh, escalation release, right?
Mhm.
This kind of things, or urgent fixes, hot fixes, this kind of things. And then some understand, yeah, maybe I could be working less if I think about security from the beginning. But then you run a SaaS scan, and then it comes with like 98% of false positives. And then
Just red linters in the ID.
And then they tell me, well, didn't you tell me I would work less? Now I'm having to triage this. No, let me triage them for you. But anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, usually it's a security engineer who starts the triaging, but it's
But
interesting
it
that you,
scares them, right? It scares them. They
yeah,
look at the result and say, oh my God, is my product that vulnerable? No, wait a minute. No,
yeah.
let me handle.
I mean, I've talked with people from two camps, one that say that we actually should start from IDE, and those who should say, no, we shouldn't start from IDE because it just does not make sense, at least with the maturity of tools we have now, as you mentioned, like false positives and developers being scared. It's interesting that you mentioned before, like that you have to that your approach, like saying that, hey, this is vulnerability is risky from security point of view. Like I've heard a lot that this for security people, quite often it's tied to exploitability as well, important for the business. In your experience, do developers actually understand better when you explain them from exploit? Like, okay, this is this risk or this issue, or if the way you code can actually be exploitable, or it doesn't speak to them at all?
It does. It really does. It really helps. But the thing that helps is not more than talking about exploitability. It's showing them how to exploit. Showing them like, because if you, in general, if you tell them, they don't necessarily have the view of, or they don't understand the difference between risk and exploitability, right? It's like if I come to them and say, hey, this is super risky. This
Mhm.
is a very high risk level vulnerability. And I come to them and say, hey, the exploitability of this is very high, right? They don't distinguish them necessarily like, okay, if this is exploitability is very high, is this a very high risk? Maybe so, maybe not, right? Now, if you show them, hey, let me show you how I can exploit this, then they can see that happening,
Mhm.
right? Then they understand, oh, so is that easy? Is really like just accessing the application and putting that payload, or just like changing the ID of this thing and then you can access other user information? Yep. That's when I tell you that is the exploitability level is very high. That's what I'm talking about, right? That's the easiness of exploiting. And then, okay, from there and on, then it makes easier. Then it start to get easier for us to talk. And then every time we talk, hey, this is very high exploitable. Oh, okay. So it's very easy, right? Very easy to
Yeah.
attack. And then they start bringing other terms like, oh, so it's very easy to attack us. Then as a security, I say, no, attack. Yeah, it's not that it's very, anyway, then I got to stop overthinking and say, yeah, it's very easy. Yes, that's,
Yeah.
is,
Probably the
uh,
easiest way to.
yeah, that's it. And then we get what we need. And then and then when we start getting that kind of conversation, then we start getting partners and people that start getting concerned, like, oh, is that easy?
Mhm.
No, let me talk to my team. So we got to prioritize this thing because we cannot have that, right? And say, okay. So in this group, and that's, I think, a challenge for us as well. It's like, for that group, that's how I need to talk to them. For other team, if I try to use the same language, it may work. It may not work. I may need to use other way to convince or explain them, convince them how easy it is or how critical that thing is.
On what does it depend on on the team lead?
I think it depends more on like their background and how they understand this thing, because there are some things I don't need to show them, because there are some, let's say they have a very mature secure champion in the team. So I don't need to show them how,
Okay.
when I say it's easy to exploit, I don't need to show them exactly what it means, or I don't need to explain them what is a vulnerability, what is the risk, and why they cannot use an unauthenticated server. Lack of authentication is not a problem anymore. This kind of thing. For other teams, you got to explain that. You got to show what is the impact, exactly what it means, and then you got to try to bring to their language. It changes maybe their how mature they are in security,
Mm.
how used to problems like that. Like if you talk to somebody that worked in a product that got breached already, you don't need to you don't need to explain security that much, right? Because they had a very bad situation already. They understand that. Now, if we're talking to somebody that is just starting to develop a new product, have never had a security problem, then the conversation is, do we really need that?
Yeah, very different. Basically, from the start, I think it's like learning on our mistakes. We all learn, and when something is actually bad happened the most, and then we definitely can remember the whole story. For example, I know that you've led, OWASP Porto Alegre chapter. In the chapter in Paris, we had a lot of developers who were coming to the meetings as well, not only like security people, but for example, developers from my company as well. Is it something that you've seen in Brazil, for example, too, versus US? Or in the US, it's mainly, I think, in San Francisco chapter, so it's mainly security engineers. So how did it differ? And do you think like bringing more developers, for example, to security meetups would help for them to better understand the impact of what they're doing?
Yes. So answering, so I participated on the Sacramento chapter here as well in California, and one difference I've seen there is in Brazil, back in Porto Alegre. Yes, the when we started the chapter, or restarted, because that was a already existing chapter, the majority of people that came were security people, not necessarily developers, right? But in cloud security, infrastructure security, even application security, but not like a pure software
Mhm.
engineer that doesn't necessarily work with security, but just interested, right? And we try to do that move and start inviting engineers, software engineers, to the chapter. And one of the feedbacks we received was, yes, it helps a lot for the very well. One of the reason is they had a chance to talk to other developers to say, oh, you also have the same problem we have. Isn't security easy for you as well? Because we always think that, oh, security, there's that other company doing security very well, and we are, we're not doing security at all. And then you talk to other people, say, no, we have pretty much the same challenge. So it helps them to at least kind of, okay, so I have a lot of things to do and to learn in security, but at least I'm not the only one that
Yeah.
had those problems. And by coming to the meetups, they felt more equipped to come back to their teams and share with them, like, remember I always talk about security. Let me show you something different. Then they start using our own language with their development teams. And that was the feedback we got. That helped a lot. We've seen more people coming. We also partnered with like PHP Association in Brazil, that we kind of made some work together, and then we got contact with some developers. So we were 3 leaders, right? And the only thing we had in common is like well defined is we need to make this for developers,
Okay.
because that should be our audience, right? Not the infrastructure security, cloud security, or even the AppSec people, but literally like the developers. Because in the end of the day, that's who develop the product, right? That's who should implement whatever OWASP brings up, like the projects, the fixes, the code, etc. Now here in Sacramento, when I participated, I didn't lead that chapter, but I went to a few meetups. I could see more. Maybe they went to that process as well, but when I went there, I saw more developers already there. I think that was a difference. 100%. Having a place or having a meetup or having a group of people that you can talk about, that you can check your peers, like how they are doing, etc., without being concerned about in your company. And is this a dumb question, right? Should I be talking about this? Or, oh my God, my leader is in the room. Can I express my doubts here? So if you are in that group, nobody has any responsibility over you. So they feel like more comfortable to do that. So I think it helps a lot.
So maybe security engineers should wear t-shirts. Don't be afraid to ask dumb questions when they are common developers. That can be a solution as well.
100%. 100%. I think, yeah,
And
people prefer not asking because they think like, oh, this. I will be seen as a dumb because my question, and the question may be dumb, but it's a question you have, right? Uh, I don't know about
yeah,
the teacher though. You can make one and send one to me.
yes. Yeah, well, that's I'm sure it actually probably exists, at least it's something because it's might be broad, but it could be fun, I think, to do. I mean, I already thought about one with like no purchasing power for security engineers, which could be very relevant as well, but we'll see. And so now the question for you that I always ask in this season: what is the buzzword that you think is the most overrated in AppSec?
The overrated, powered by AI, I think.
Why? Because
Because
everything now is powered by AI.
yes, yes. Here's the thing. When AI right now is being used a lot of like in report generation, summarizing text, etc. But it's not really taking decisions for us yet in terms of, let's say, um, let's automate our entire DevSecOps pipeline, right?
Mhm.
And I will have like a crew of agents that can triage my result, let's say, can do my threat model. Based on my threat model, they can define what are the most critical assets I have in my product. And then based on that, they will fine tune my scans to make those scans a little bit stricter or the code review stricter on those assets. They will prioritize the fixes based on the threat model, right? And they will retest everything in like a controlled environment. They will do fuzzing, they will do like dynamic testing, they will validate that whatever we fixed is fixed before it goes to production. And then just tell us, okay, you are operating in an acceptable risk level. You can go ahead. Then I will say, okay, that's what I'm talking about when I think about AI. But right now, when you see like, oh, this is powered by AI, it's like helping to write a rule for seeing or helping you to, you know, explain what a piece of code is doing. That is all good. That's all good. That accelerates your process, right? But it's not as magic as it's being sold. Like, oh, now this is powered by AI, so that's. I mean, it's revolutioning. No, it's not. Right? Not yet.
So, for example, if someone, let's say, platform built with AI agents or based on AI agents, I don't know if you've seen like Qualys just released their AI agents. I don't know if they work well, but they just announced that at Black Hat. Would then it be something impressive for you?
Depends, because the first question, okay, what do you agents do? Right? Are you like agents like report generation agents? Or why putting agents make your solution better? How makes it faster? How makes it, for example, does it make your solution identify less false positives? That was my first question to Qualys, is like, by putting those agents, are you reducing your false positive ratio to 0?
To 0, I don't think so.
Right? Well, but that would be, yes. You are reducing the noise, like, let's say close to 0. Okay. That's what we're talking about. That's changing the game. A problem that is a very long time in place, right? And then you're
Yeah.
using a solution like a real, very hard problem for security in general. So I don't know if the term powered by AI is the overrated term, but I think the reliance on AI, market around AI is, I think it's an overbuzz right now. And I understand the reasons. I understand, of course, if I had a company that was selling a product, I would probably use that. I would probably surf that wave as well. It's needed, right? It's how the market works. But
If
as
you
a security
have it, you're
yeah.
outdated.
But as a security practitioner, you always have question like, okay, why putting AI make you better? Because you are charging more. You are asking, right? As soon as you put AI, you usually say, okay, that's a little bit more expensive now. It's AI. So why is it better? Why you're making it do better for that? And then, right? And that's, I think, those things I try to evaluate every time, right? So I can give you an example, and again understand the progression on that. But AI powered vulnerability fixes, right? So let's say you run a scan, or even do a code. If you do a code review, it's not that necessary because the person knows how to fix it. But let's say you run a scan, and then you have an AI agent that get the scan and start suggesting fixes for you.
Mhm.
Amazing, right? But what if it's a false positive for one? Then you are suggesting a fix for something that doesn't need to be fixed, right? So you still need somebody to triage that.
You
Second
need
one,
someone to finish that.
Second one is, are you allowing the agent to fix that for you, or you still need somebody to review the code?
Yeah, for me, for example, that's the most difficult part, that someone should know actually that whether it's correct. That I see it even in such a simple thing as writing text, with AI. Because, for example, that's what's happening with junior professionals. They start questioning, and you have a bunch of confirmation bias that are thrown as well in what's done. And like now, I have to tell a lot of junior people working with me, hey, actually go first to Google and research if that's correct answer, because in the end they just don't have yet the ability to understand what's fed to them by AI is wrong or right, and that's actually going to be a huge problem, at least in my opinion, in the future.
Yeah, no, 100%. And we are moving towards and I hope we get there, but with quality, but we are moving towards a fully automated development process in which you become like a prompt developer, that you give the coding agents to develop your code. They can write tests. And imagine if they can identify vulnerabilities and fix them and test and fuzz and do everything, then, I mean, we're probably a bit far from that, but that's where we're moving towards, right? That's our
Yes.
holy grail. That's what you want to have. But right now, It's pretty much like that. So in that case I was talking about, the question is, are you really helping the teams, or you are flooding them with PRs that they need to review anyway?
Yeah.
And then they go back to the problem. Okay, I don't have the scan to analyze anymore. I don't have the, let's say, the false positives, but I have 50 PRs open right now. I need to prioritize them. I cannot review all of them at once. So where should I start? And then comes the AppSec engineer again to say which one is more risky and which one you need to, right? But that's where we are. That said, I think we have a very, very, we'll get there. I'm just saying right now, that's how I see it. But we have so many potential, like in things like, for example, helping my product, my software engineers to keep the tech stack always updated, right? So one challenge, I think it's very common across industries, like if you need to update libraries that are legacy code, that we have very old libraries, right? It breaks apart. If you just go there and update, it breaks apart your entire code base, right?
Yeah, because it's going to change.
Exactly. So AI has the potential to do that for you, right? So AI has the potential to, like, you can put a crew of agents to say, okay, guys, to the agents, right? Here's the library I need to update. Go search in my code base and identify everything that may break, everything that may need to update it, and update that for me. And then that would be as simple as, okay, update my library to version XYZ, and then the agents will do all that. Those are things that, okay, Dad, I can pay a lot of money for that. Or again, I would invest a lot, because that is solving a real pain, a difficult problem, right? Supply chain that reduce risk and this kind of things. So
So I
I
think,
talk a lot, but it's just like to say I don't hate AI. The opposite, I love that. It's just it's too hyped on what is due right now, right?
I think the next year is definitely going to be very exciting in terms of seeing what's going to be developed and what's going to be built. We'll see. Thank you so much, Marcus, for coming on the show, and it was a great chat together. And I'm excited to see it live. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.